Throughout history, one question returns again and again. Why have Jews been persecuted for so long? And why does this hatred still exist today? The answer isn't simple. It's not about one event, one belief, or one country. It's a long, complex historical pattern shaped by fear, power, and the deeply human need to find someone to blame. This video is going to explain how that pattern began, how it evolved over centuries, and why, even now, it hasn't disappeared. To understand the roots, we need to go back to the ancient world. Judaism is one of the oldest surviving monotheistic religions. In a world full of empires worshipping many gods, Jews were different. They were often a small minority, living among much larger civilizations. They had their own unique laws, customs, and traditions. Most importantly, they worshipped a single, unseen God, and didn't participate in the worship of local deities. This made them stand out. In many societies, then and now, being different can breed suspicion. At this early stage, there was hostility and prejudice, but widespread, systematic persecution was still inconsistent. The seeds, however, were being planted. The idea of the Jew as the other had begun to take root. A major, transformative shift occurred when Christianity rose to become the dominant religion in Europe. Early Christian theology created a new and powerful narrative. It portrayed Jews as the people who had rejected Jesus. Over centuries, this religious idea hardened into a deep-seated social stigma. Jews were generally allowed to live in Christian societies, but they were often relegated to the status of a second-class community. They were tolerated, but they were also marked as fundamentally different and spiritually flawed. Religion, which for many was the ultimate source of truth, now became a powerful justification for exclusion and discrimination. This wasn't just about being different anymore. It was about being on the wrong side of a divine story. As Europe moved into the Middle Ages, this religious hostility intensified and morphed into something even more dangerous. Antisemitism became deeply embedded in the social fabric. Jews were often forced to live in segregated neighborhoods, later known as ghettos, and were barred from many professions and from owning land. Then, when crises struck and they struck, often people desperately looked for someone to blame. Plagues like the Black Death wiped out huge portions of the population. Famines led to widespread starvation. Economic collapses ruined lives. In these moments of extreme fear and uncertainty, Jews became the convenient scapegoat. Wild, baseless accusations began to spread like fire. Stories claimed that Jews were poisoning wells to cause plagues, or that they were kidnapping Christian children for ritual murders, a horrifying accusation known as the blood libel. People whispered about secret Jewish conspiracies to undermine Christian society. None of these stories were based on evidence. They were pure fiction, born from panic and prejudice. But fear is a powerful motivator, and it spreads much faster than facts. These myths, no matter how irrational, were believed by many and led to horrific waves of violence and massacres. There was also an economic dimension to this growing resentment. Because Jews were excluded from owning land and joining craft guilds in many places, they were pushed into a limited number of professions. One of these was money lending. In medieval Europe, the church often forbade Christians from charging interest, viewing it as a sin. So, a space opened up that rulers often encouraged or even forced Jews to fill. This created a very dangerous dynamic. Rulers and nobles could borrow heavily to fund their wars and lifestyles, and the general population often went into debt just to survive. When people became angry about their debts or economic hardship, it was easy for rulers to deflect that anger away from themselves and onto the moneylenders. This fostered a toxic and enduring myth, the idea that Jews secretly controlled all the wealth and wielded hidden power. This stereotype of the greedy, powerful Jewish financier became a cornerstone of anti-Semitic propaganda. It's a myth that has proven incredibly persistent, echoing through the centuries and still surfacing today in modern conspiracy theories about global finance. Then, in the 19th century, the world began to change dramatically. The Enlightenment had brought new ideas about reason, science, and individual rights. Nationalism swept across Europe, and societies became more secular. You might think that this would have been the end of a prejudice rooted in medieval religion, but anti-Semitism didn't disappear. Instead, it adapted. It shaped a new, modern form of antisemitism emerged, one that was based on so-called science and race, not just religion. Influential writers and thinkers began to describe Jews not as followers of a different faith, but as a biologically distinct and inferior race. According to this pseudoscientific racism, Jews were a threat to the purity of the national bloodline. This meant that even if a Jewish person converted to Christianity or completely assimilated into society, they were still seen as an outsider, as fundamentally and unchangeably other. Their Jewishness was supposedly in their blood. Hatred had simply put on a new, modern costume, using the language of science and nationalism to justify the same old prejudice. The most extreme, horrific outcome of this long history of antisemitism was the Holocaust. Nazi Germany, under Adolf Hitler, took all the old myths, the conspiracy theories, the racial pseudoscience, the economic resentment, combined them with the terrifying efficiency of a modern industrial state. They used propaganda to amplify centuries of prejudice and turn it into a state-sponsored ideology of extermination. Millions of Jewish men, women, and children were systematically murdered. The Holocaust was not some random, inexplicable accident of history. It was the logical, albeit monstrous conclusion of centuries of dehumanization and hatred, supercharged by totalitarian power. After the unspeakable horrors of the Second World War, many people hoped and believed that antisemitism would finally be discredited forever. But it wasn't. So why does it still exist today? Antisemitism survives because it is incredibly flexible. It's like a virus that mutates to adapt to new environments and new anxieties. Three forces are particularly important in keeping it alive in the 21st century. First, there's the explosive growth of conspiracy thinking, especially online. The internet allows age-old myths about a secret cabal controlling the world to spread instantly and globally. These theories often replace the word Jews with coded language like globalists or elites, but the underlying structure of the myth is identical to the anti-Semitic propaganda of the past. Second is the issue of identity crises. In an increasingly globalized and polarized world, many societies are grappling with difficult questions about who belongs and what defines their national identity. During these times of social stress and uncertainty, minorities often become easy targets. Antisemitism provides a simplistic us versus them narrative that can be appealing to people who feel lost or left behind. And third, global conflicts, particularly the ongoing conflict between Israelis and Palestinians in the Middle East, often fuel a new wave of antisemitism. It is absolutely legitimate to criticize the policies of the Israeli government, just as one can criticize any other government. However, this criticism too often bleeds into holding all Jewish people, everywhere in the world, collectively responsible for the actions of the State of Israel. This is a classic anti-Semitic trope, blaming an entire, diverse group for the actions of a few. If you look across the centuries, the specific accusations change, but the underlying pattern remains remarkably consistent. At different times, Jews have been blamed for being too different and separate. At other times, they've been blamed for being too successful and influential. They've been accused of being disloyal outsiders, and simultaneously of being a secret international network. These accusations are often wildly contradictory, and that very contradiction reveals the truth. Antisemitism has never been a rational set of arguments. It is a tool. It's a tool for deflecting blame, for simplifying complex problems, for uniting a group against a common enemy, and for justifying power. Ultimately, Jews are not persecuted because of something inherent in who they are. They are persecuted because antisemitism provides deceptively simple answers to life's most complex and frightening questions. Understanding this long, painful history is crucial, because a hatred that can survive for 2,000 years, constantly adapting and reinventing itself, can always return in new forms. And when it does, it's never just a danger to one group of people. It's a warning sign for all of society that fear, division, and irrationality are on the rise. Thank you for watching. If you found this explanation helpful, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content that explores complex historical topics.